Don't sweat it. Batman doesn't kill people.
Before we talk about Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, I have to tell you guys two things. Two things that I think will help contextualize my thoughts about the game. Number one being, I really enjoyed the Avengers video game. Was it a piss poor live service game? Absolutely. But I ignored all of the live service elements and I played this game as if it was solely a single player story driven game. Which, by the way, you can definitely do that. I think the Avengers game has a single player story that's absolutely worth playing through for the most part. But anyway, I tell you that as a way of making it clear that I'm someone who is already fully capable of enjoying a game like Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. I feel like I went into this game with more optimism than most people. And the second thing I want to say is that I don't have any real love for the Batman Arkham games. I have no nostalgia for that franchise. I did not play those games growing up. In fact, I played Batman Arkham Asylum for the very first time last week to prep for this. And I have a video about me playing it for the first time on my channel you should definitely check out, link in the description. And again, I tell you that as a way of explaining that I don't really have any real preconceived notions or any real expectations about what a Arkham game should be, or really what a Rocksteady game in general should be. So when all the panic alarms started going off in the gaming community with each new trailer and each new gameplay reveal, I just kind of sat back and watched it. I didn't really care, if I'm being honest with you. So with those two things being said, you're now fully aware of my mindset and my mentality going into Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. So now I'm going to jump into my review. I'm going to show you guys some raw gameplay, but before I do that, you should definitely subscribe if you end up liking this video. I talk about video games all the time on this page, day one reviews just like this, but lots of other gaming content as well. But I also talk about movies and TV shows. This is definitely a small channel, but it's growing, and I would love to have you part of that. So first things first, I want to make it clear that this is a first impressions review. I have not beaten the game yet, but I have been playing it during this early access period. But I do have a good handful of hours in the game so far. I've been playing it for the vast majority of today, and I feel like I have a lot of solid thoughts to give you guys my first impressions. And if you're anything like me, you want to know that a game is good from the start. You don't like being recommended games when someone says they get good after 20 or so hours. But depending on how this video performs, I will absolutely make a follow-up video when I beat the game, which will be sooner than later because I'm having a lot of fun with that. I'll say that right out the gate. But anyway, I'm going to break this review up into pros and cons, and I'm going to start with the pros first. And the first pro I want to talk about is the gameplay. The core gameplay is actually really fun, which is the main thing I wanted from this game, is I just wanted it to be fun to play. I wanted this to be a game that I could turn my brain off and just enjoy the gameplay mechanics, the core combat loop. And so far, I absolutely am. Especially if you're a fan of third-person shooters, this game just feels so good to play, and I'm happy to report that in my experience playing this game on a PlayStation 5, it runs smooth as butter. I'm not really experiencing any glitches. I'm not really experiencing any game-breaking bugs. I'm not really experiencing any frame rate issues either, which is very surprising because there's so much happening on screen in any given moment. And this is a looter shooter, so gear is a big part of this game. You're always finding new weapons, you're always finding new guns, and I'm also happy to say that weapons, in my opinion, feel very different from each other, which is something I was not expecting. I was expecting guns to basically be cosmetic changes and stat changes, but to relatively feel the same. But when you're using an assault rifle and then you find a different assault rifle and you equip that assault rifle, it feels distinctively different from everything from how much kick that gun has to the fire rate. And the same can definitely be said with the sniper rifles, the shotguns. There's just a good weapon pool here, and I'm really happy to say that. But again, the moment-to-moment gameplay, the core gameplay loop feels so much better than I was expecting. It's so fun getting from point A to point B, fighting the enemies, countering attacks, recharging your shield. And there's just a lot more details, a lot more mechanics to this game than I was expecting. Like, I had no idea, you probably did, but I had no idea that you would be able to fly around in a vehicle and shoot people from that vehicle. It was just so much fun to do that. And also, the characters feel different enough, in my opinion. Yes, they can use the same guns. So for example, you can give King Shark a pistol and you can give Harley Quinn this huge ass machine gun. So shooting feels the same from character to character, but they do feel different in a lot of other ways, especially when it comes to melee combat and especially when it comes to the way that you get around the world. But they mainly feel different because they're all surprisingly fleshed out in the story, which brings me to the story of this game. It's way better than I was expecting. I'm really enjoying the story so far. There's a surprising amount of cutscenes that really focuses on the story. Again, it feels like the characters were treated with respect. It feels like they're people. It feels like they're characters. It doesn't just feel like they're avatars to put your gear onto. And so you experience these story moments, and when you do that, you feel like you know Harley Quinn better as a character. You feel like you know Deadshot better as a character. So at least for me, when I chose to play as them in any given section of the game, they felt different because I felt like I knew them more as characters. And the story to live service ratio is a lot better so far than I feel like some might expect. For the first 5, 6, maybe even 7 hours of this game, it feels genuinely like it's a story-driven game with live service elements to it. It doesn't feel like it's a live service game with a story, thrown into it. It really does feel like the story was more of a focus, in my opinion, than the live service aspects. It really reminds me of the Avengers video game in that regard. There's a lot more characters than I was expecting. I'm not going to spoil anything, but there's a lot more characters than just your core Suicide Squad and your core Justice League, and that was really cool as well. Now the objectives, what you're actually doing from mission to mission, it can feel samey at times. It's often go here, kill all the enemies, go here, blow up this thing. Yes, that's true and that's unfortunate, but somehow for me it works within the narrative, but we'll see how long that lasts. And there's a lot of customizable options, from weapons to outfits. There's weapon skins, there's weapon charms, and there's a surprising amount of customization options when it comes to the skins that you equip on your characters. But I can't speak yet on if that stuff is unlocked through gameplay or if it's reserved for real money. Now I'm going to get into the cons of Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, and unfortunately there is more than just a couple, but I feel like everyone was expecting that. The first con that I want to talk about is the pacing. The pacing, especially in the first few hours of this game, feels very off. I said this game has a lot of story moments and a lot of cutscenes, and that's true, and I do appreciate that. But in the first few hours of the game, I feel like honestly there might be a bit too many of them, because it took a bit too long for me to really get my footing, to really feel like I could just play the game. In terms of playing the game, every time I was getting into it, I was interrupted by a 5-minute long cutscene. And that continues to happen a surprising amount of the way through the game, but it does clear up a little bit as the game progresses. The next con might just be a pet peeve of mine. It might just be a me problem, but there is just so much talking in this game, and I hate it. I hate it so much. Obviously, there's a lot of banter between the Suicide Squad, which I don't mind. I like that, but it's happening all the time, and that's not the problem. It's just that when it's happening, you're interrupted all the time by people speaking into your ear. Rick Flag, Amanda Waller, constantly talking to you. And dialogue plays over other dialogue, or dialogue just straight up cuts out other dialogue, and it's always happening. And mixed in with that, you have this hacking thing so you can hear what the evil Justice League are saying. So for example, Boomerang will be talking to Deadshot, and you could be invested in their conversation, and then suddenly Amanda Waller pops into your ear and just interrupts that conversation. And then you start to hear Batman talking to the Flash or talking to Green Lantern or whatever, and then that interrupts that. It's like 3 layers of interruption. And there's always someone talking, and I just grew to hate it. And my next con, which is the most unfortunate con, especially for a gameplay perspective, is that I do wish there was more differences from character to character. Yes, I said they feel more different than I was expecting them to, and I feel like they feel more different than a lot of people are expecting them to, and I do think that's true. I just wish they were different even more so. Now granted, that could change the more skills that I unlocked. Like I said, I have not beaten the game yet, but from the beginning I wish they did have more unique gameplay mechanics to each specific character. But anyway, that's my first impressions on Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. I feel like I'm enjoying it more than a lot of people probably are, and honestly I feel like I'm enjoying it more than a lot of people might. But like I said from the beginning, I went into this game with low expectations. I went into this game with no expectations, and I was expecting very little, so I feel like I'm easier to please when it comes to a game like this. Have you played Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League yet? Or do you plan to ignore it completely? Let me know in the comments, and once again, consider subscribing, and thank you for watching, especially if you watched this far.